catch you at all by surprise today?
I think it did a little bit to everybody. As you said, the word came out late last week, and there was an announcement. I think everybody saw on X and Twitter, and then obviously some changes, discussions happened over the weekend, and then you wake up and hear the news this morning.
So you played for Thad. You've been around the program forever now. How would you describe what Thad has meant to the Butler basketball program and sort of his legacy with Butler basketball?
Well, yeah, he's been a lot. Obviously, for me personally, this is he gave me the opportunity to be a part of the Butler men's basketball program. So I'm forever indebted to Thad, to Barb, to Allie, to Emily, to the entire Mata family. And I think a lot of Butler feels that way too. He got his start at Butler, had the 1 year there back in the day. We set the school record for wins. One thing I loved about him, I remember vividly that first team meeting, like he wrote 24 up on the board and said, that's the goal. We're going to set the school record for wins this year. And he had an ability to make everybody believe. And he always instilled confidence in his players and in his staff and everybody around him. And just the way that he interacted with people. He's just a great guy. I mean, you've interacted with him, I'm sure, Rich. And, there's not a lot of fluff or coach filler with him. Kind of what you see is what you get. He's going to shoot you straight. And he's a guy who when you talk to him, when you communicate with him, it's about more than just basketball with him. He's an excellent developer and cultivator of relationships. And I think that's what sticks out most in my interactions with him.
Yeah. I actually went to school with Thad. He's a year older than me, but Barb and I are in the same class. I knew Barb real well. Um, I think people felt like generally that when he came back to Butler, that he was kind of doing his alma mater a solid, when kind of taking on a role that maybe he didn't need to or didn't have to. Um, how would you evaluate how it's worked out here over these last 4 seasons?
Yeah, I think look, we basketball and sports in general, they're a results-oriented business. And so I think sometimes the strides that programs that people take, they don't always show in those results when it's a win or a loss. And I think number one, you're right. I think like a big reason why he came back was because it was Butler. I'm not sure Thad Matta comes back to coach any other university in the way he talked about it. So I would say wins and losses aside, with the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, NIL, revenue share, transfer portal, all those things, even though maybe the success didn't show, I don't think that Butler's ever been in a better position to now look towards an ever-changing future if they've been set up as well as they are now. And Thad is a big reason why. And you look at a lot of guys of his, coaching generation, they saw a lot of these changes coming down the pike and they got out, right? They were like, this isn't what I came up coaching. I'm gonna just push myself away from the table and not have to deal with that. Thad didn't do that. He jumped right back in right when things were changing, and for him to do that and kind of maneuver in the ever-changing landscape and do so at a place that he loves and cares about so much. Again, I think a lot of the stuff in the background maybe didn't show all the work that Butler has done as far as revenue share, raising money, becoming, a real player in the Big East. And so I think it's been a success. I think he was the right guy for the job at the time. And he, to me, he doesn't sweat some of the small stuff that some of these coaches do, that they're almost maniacal with every little aspect of their program. And certainly you have to do that. But boy, you can't let it bother you so much that you get hung up on it. And that's why I think Thad was so great for Butler at this time, and why Butler is set up for so much success now moving forward with such a changing landscape, because a lot of the work that Thad and Grant and everybody in that department did over the last 4 years.
So, that being the case, do you have any insight or opinion on why he decided to retire?
I do not. Everything, and there's always speculation and rumors from outside, but in talking with people that dealt with him on more of a day-to-day basis, and just in my conversations with him, he was ready to go. He was talking about next year. So no insight. I think it's one where you take a step away, and he obviously sat down and talked with his girls and felt like today was the right time. And more power to him. I'm just so appreciative of all the work that he did for Butler University. He at a time when he was hired 4 years ago, there was a lot of questions. And to your point, Rich, immediate credibility, right? When you bring Thad Matta in as your head coach, you know that this is a serious operation, and this thing is steering towards winning. And so, just really grateful that he's kind of able to dictate and go out on his own terms and say, I've done my part. He's obviously still going to be involved in the university, so it's going to be great to still have him around because anytime you can have a legend like that around your program, your athletic department, you want to have them.
And it would seem to me that in this new role that he will have some, if not significant, say in hiring the new coach. In fact, if I kind of read between the lines of the press release, I could almost say that maybe Thad and Grant already know who the next coach is going to be. I don't know if you see any of that.
I I don't know if necessarily they know who it's going to be. I think to me, what I read into it is, look, I'm here to help whomever that is, bridge that gap. I think so many times, Rich, you see new staff comes in, you've got all new people, and just those first few weeks, those first few months where you're trying to get your feet wet, you're trying to figure out, hey, who do I communicate with on campus to get this done? Who do I talk to about this? Just kind of those communication ways and kind of bridging that gap. He's going to be there to help talk through whoever the new staff is, the new coach is, and just try to make that transition as seamless as possible. Look, oftentimes when you have new staffs, there may be animosity. Who knows? Guys are trying to stay on. And so to me, it just says, hey, we're all on the same page here. And whomever this next person is, the guy that you're going to be replacing is going to be right here that you can talk to and lean on as that transition progresses.
Ever since, well, I mean, even Barry Collier is a hire, has been a hire within the family. And ever since then, it has been a new hire within the family. Uh, any reason to think it won't be another family hire?
Um, I I would say no, right? When you mention what you said, and there's different ways you can kind of get inside the family, right? I mean, Chris Holtman ended up being a great hire, obviously, but he was kind of untraditionally brought into the Butler family. So I think it is important, Rich, that look, if it's not the head guy, there's got to be some connection on staff with how Butler operates and how you get things done around Hinkle Fieldhouse. And I think that's true in any athletic department or any news department, right? Like it's good to have somebody who's been there before in some capacity that understands the intricacies of the building, of who to talk to, of the relationships. And I think that's why you've seen, and look, the fact is, Rich, those hires for the most part have had success, right? They've proven that they have worked out. And so having somebody that has a finger on the pulse of Hinkle Fieldhouse, of Butler University, I think it's probably a good bet that in some form or some capacity, somebody on that staff that's heavily involved in decision making and how they operate is probably going to have worked in that building at some point before, and they understand, kind of the intricacies of how to operate at Butler University.
Well, I won't ask you to throw your support behind a candidate unless you want to. But I mean, I think of you got Travis Steele at Miami, who's got to be a hot coaching commodity right now. He's a Butler grad and was a graduate assistant for Thad at Ohio State. You've got his brother, John Gross, who's the coach at Akron and won 3 consecutive conference championships there. They're both going to be in the NCAA tourney. It would be a really wild dynamic to see two guys as brothers competing for a job. You certainly have a guy like Ronald Norad, who's a Hawks assistant coach. Alex Barlow's on the staff. There's certainly probably a current assistant or two who is ready to become a head coach. Do you have thoughts initially about who might be on that candidates list?
Well, I'd say initially a lot of the names you said, right? I think obviously people are going to think Ron Nord is a candidate, even though he doesn't have a ton of college experience. He's got a lot of experience and head coaching experience at various levels. I think Ryan Pedon's a guy who's had some success at Illinois State, who was on Chris Holtman's staff, who's probably going to get mentioned. Obviously, Steele and Gross and their connections with Butler University. So I think along those lines, right, are some people, and it's interesting. It's a few of the other times there's kind of been a natural guy within the pecking order. I don't know that there's necessarily a natural guy, but there's a bunch of guys who seem to check the boxes that you would want that also have some of the connections to Butler University. That leads me to believe. And then there's always some candidates where, I'm sure we'd love to reach behind the curtains of some of these searches and know, like, what are some of the names that reached out that you would have never thought reached out for those jobs, but did. So, look, I think it's going to be an attractive candidate base. Um, Look, basketball people know, and resource all the, the college landscape aside, there's value, and people put value in being able to go to work at Hinkle Fieldhouse every day and being able to compete in the Big East and being able to be at a part that really, or a place that values basketball like Butler University does. And to me, those kind of intangible qualities that Butler possesses and offers for candidates that are hard to quantify and hard to put a dollar amount on, those are the things that are going to make this a really attractive position.
Last question, Nick. I'm a journalist, but I'm also a Butler basketball fan as an alum. And I have wondered some over the past several years, does Butler belong in the Big East? Butler honestly has not been competitive for a Big East championship since they joined. Thad was never able to get this team even to a 500 record in the Big East. Um, you wonder about alumni base having the financial resources to support college basketball in a big time way as we stand right now. You addressed some of this earlier. Can Butler compete in the Big East and in big time college basketball under this new system we now have?
Yes, I think they can. And I think when you look at how everything has reshuffled over the past 10, 15 years, um, you had to get on that upper side, that upper tier of the landscape and the atmosphere. I mean, the A10's a great league. It's a one big league still now. And so, like, as that delta and that divide has grown over the years, it was imperative that you get on the proper side of that. And that, by that I mean, you got to be on the side where there's more revenue generating opportunities, there's more TV dollars, there's more exposure. And so, to me, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, the move to the Big East was the right move. Now it's like, and what I said was, I think we're set up better than we have ever before because of our leadership, frankly, because of Jim Danko and his ability to have the vision on where things are going. How is Butler going to set itself up, not just with education, because second, like college education, there's some reform coming there in general too with the way things are going. But how do we set Butler up in this college landscape to be able to compete? And although those results haven't come, the work in the background, it's getting there. It's getting better and better. And so, to me, the reason I feel so encouraged is because Butler has always had this a great thing to offer with its basketball program, its school, all those things that Indianapolis and Butler offer. And now you're at the big boy table. You're at the Big East. Now we've got leadership and things in process. Hey, how do we grow this now with the things that we put in place? And so, to me, yes, we can win at that level. And I've never been more encouraged because of the leadership that Grant Linedecker and his athletic department staff have shown. And so now I think it's just a matter of starting to implement those things. And here's a chance to continue on that growth. And now it's obviously a big part of that growth and a big hire. But now, there's some groundwork there in the background that's been laid that maybe sets this next guy up for hopefully some more success than we've seen in the past.